G'day trendsetters, John with Gravel Cyclist. To my immediate left is Mr Burke Swindlehurst. He's the promoter of Crusher and the Tushar and a whole lot more. So thanks for your time today, I appreciate
Absolutely,
it.
yeah.
Do us a favour, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so I started bike racing on the road when I was 13 years old, and eventually transitioned into professional cycling when I was around 24. Did that until 37 years old and retired in 2010. And I'd always loved riding on gravel roads when I was training for road racing, just because I liked where they took me more than anything. You know, get up in the hills and away from cars and in the mountains. So I'd kind of always had this idea for an event that would take in gravel roads and hopefully bring communities of like road racing and mountain biking, bring those two communities together somehow. And so in 2011 I started the Crusher and the Tushar, and here we are 9 years later, and it seems like people like it.
It's sold out in less than, what, 2 minutes or 2 hours?
No, it's 2 hours.
2 hours, yeah. Very impressive. If you haven't done this race, I suggest you do. It's a serious challenge. The altitude's very painful, especially if you're coming from Florida. But the scenery is amazing, and you'll love the experience. So what direction do you see this genre, gravel cycling, heading?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I think about that a lot, especially, I'd say within the last year. It seems like it's really starting to take off. And honestly, I don't know where it's headed. I mean, it's, on one hand, it's really exciting to kind of look at things, and on the other, you're kind of a bit apprehensive, wondering if, you know, I mean, in a lot of ways, it reminds me of mountain biking, you know, back in the 80s when it first started to take off and people really started to embrace it and have that really fun kind of group atmosphere, very chilled out. And I think that's still, I think that still remains in mountain biking to a certain extent, but of course it's become professionalized now, and there are a lot of parallels between, you know, road racing and mountain biking now in terms of the organization. But I think at the core of mountain biking, there's still that heart of like fun, and I hope that is retained in gravel cycling as it evolves. I'd hate to see that ever be compromised by competition, you know, people's just wanting to compete and kind of losing focus on what started the movement in the first place, which is getting together and having a good time and, you know, enjoying camaraderie and the surroundings.
So what has been your favorite event to date?
Oh man, I think I've done several events. I love Rebecca's Private Idaho. I've done that every year. I think probably my favorite event though would be the Rock Cobbler in Bakersfield that Sam Ames puts on. Mostly just because he's definitely kind of an eccentric person, and that resonates with me. I feel like I'm kind of that way myself, and so those eccentricities kind of infuse his event in terms of just the terrain that he has you tackle. You know, it's got single track, it has like ridiculous run-ups in it that are, I wouldn't call them run-ups, I mean you're basically on your hands and knees with your bike on your back just groveling up dirt, and then at one point you get to the top of something like that and he's got somebody in a drill sergeant uniform telling you to do 10 push-ups before you can move on. So that's one thing I really love about gravel racing in particular, is since it's kind of open to interpretation, and that's what I hope is retained as the genre grows, that people can kind of take little bits and pieces of their own personality and infuse those into the events. And, you know, each event has its own unique characteristic, and that's one thing I really love about the Cobbler.
How about this year? Do you have any rides on the agenda? I assume Cobbler again, or maybe something else?
I'm tentatively planning to do Cobbler again, although the winter in Utah has been a little unforgiving this year, and I haven't been able to ride nearly as much as I'd like to, and I still have that kind of competitive nature in me. So it makes it difficult to think about going to an event and just getting my teeth kicked in, which seems to happen more and more often than it used to. So But Cobbler, Rebecca's, I'll probably go do that again since I've done it every year, and Rebecca puts on a fantastic event. And then there's other events that I've never done that I would love to. Obviously Dirty Kansas, one that I don't know that I'm necessarily suited to it, but I'd love to go find out what it's all about because I've heard so many great things about it.
And this is a very controversial question here concerning drivetrains. 1x or 2x? Which one do you prefer?
I love 1x. As soon as the 1x came out, I was all over it. I like the fact that they're just not very complicated. You never really have to worry about dropping a chain now with the clutch derailleurs, and I'm totally sold on 1x myself.
Okay, good stuff. And finally, how about suspension on gravel bikes?
You know, initially I thought there's no need for suspension whatsoever. And Lauf reached out to me last year and asked if I would be interested in trying out one of their bikes. And I kind of looked at it sideways and thought, I don't know, but I said, send me out a bike. And within a day of riding it, I was absolutely sold on their front suspension. It's quite stiff. You're not really aware of it until you actually need it, which I think is ideal. So I think there is room for suspension. I just don't know how crazy it needs to get.
Understood. Burke, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Jason. Yeah, it's been fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.